Show you how to set up the machine, how to check it's safe to use, and some of the PPE that you're going to need to use the machine safely. So the first thing you need to do is generally check over the machine, and you're looking for anything that may cause you to not be able to use that machine safely. So making sure the safety guards are in place, there's nothing hanging off the machine and loose, those kinds of things. So if we start at the head end, you're just going to spin that round, check there's nothing loose. You're going to check the head's not overly worn. That all looks good. You're going to check that the cutting blade is in place and not loose. That will trim your cutter line to the optimum length for trimming. That's all nice and tight. Then moving up, this particular strimmer is the split shaft design, so you can have different types of head actually attached to this engine unit. So that's nice and tight on there. Your handles all lined up and isn't twisted round. That's where you're going to connect your harness if you wanted it. All your buttons are there, nothing's broken, everything appears to be working as it should. Then you've got your engine unit. Now this one you can see has actually got some tape on it, and that is where, on this particular one, a bolt is missing. So we need at some point to replace that bolt, but that in this instance doesn't signify a machine that's sort of too damaged to be used. It's not posing any threat or danger, it's just a bit of an inconvenience when it comes to maintain the spark plug. All the necessary covers are in place, covering up the exhaust inside there, which can be hot. So if any of this area was broken away, I'd be looking at that and thinking that's too dangerous to use, because you're exposing your skin and clothing to touching that hot exhaust once you get going. That's all looking good. Fuel caps on there, that's nice and tight. Then the pull cord, that's all there as well and looking good. And then you just look down the length of the machine and check it's all nicely lined up. I can see from looking at that one, that engine unit's actually slightly skewed, so that does need a bit of maintenance just to kind of bring it back in line. But again, it is okay to use. It just means ergonomically that handle's not quite lined up where you'd ideally like it to be for that one, but it's okay. The second bit we're going to look at is the health and safety side of using this particular machine. Now we've got some warning information here which you need to sort of pay close attention to. So these blue ones in particular, they cover the PPE that you have to wear, and a blue circle indicates it's mandatory, so this isn't optional. Okay, so first one there indicates that you've got to be looking at the owner's manual. You should have flicked through the owner's manual to make sure you're familiar with that. Then you've got the ear protection and eye protection. Then you've got your safety boots and your gloves. So you will need all those things in place. So you could use a helmet like that where it's all in one, or you could use individual items like these, and then just a pair of, doesn't need to be a thick pair of gloves, it's just a thin pair of gloves. That will help a little bit with the vibration from the machine, but also protect your hands from any kind of impact from stones and that sort of thing. Now it is worth remembering that if you were working anywhere close to someone else trimming, even though you were keeping a sensible distance, it is a good idea to wear your own pair of safety glasses as well. So for example, if you're using a lawnmower and your colleague is trimming, it's always a good idea to have some glasses on as well, because stones and debris can be flicked for an awful long way. Okay, and then the circle there, with the red circle with the line through it, that is indicating that you mustn't come within 15 meters of someone's trimming. So if you're the person doing some trimming, you need to make sure that members of the public aren't coming within 15 meters of you. You would be amazed at how close people get to you, even though you're clearly working, doing a dangerous job. So that's really going to be your responsibility to make sure the area you're working in, people are keeping a safe distance. And I say in this case it is 15 metres. So the yellow signs, they are just warning signs. There's a general warning sign there, which I suppose is a coverall, just to say all sorts of things could happen, but that's non-specific. The other warning signs here are for the spinning head, so it's denoting where the danger is mainly coming from, which is that spinning head. Then this one here is various impacts, so spinning head spitting off stones and debris, hitting people in the face, body, all that sort of thing. So it's warning against that. So you know, it's a good idea to wear full-length trousers if you can. It's not essential, but if you don't, there's a fair chance you're going to get hit in the legs. You've got to decide what's worse, being hit in the legs with stones or being hot while you're strimming. Okay, so now we check the machine over, we know it's safe to use, we've got all our PPE, we understand that. The next thing we're going to be doing is starting the engine. One thing to think about when you do that is once the engine starts, the nasty end of the machine could start spinning, so just be careful and mindful of where that it is. You really need it over grass or some solid concrete. You don't want to be starting it up on something that could damage, or starting it up on a load of gravel or something like that, or in a flower bed or next to someone's legs. Okay, so make sure that end is somewhere nice and safe. Okay, so this particular machine, it's got a priming button. You need to do the primer about 3 times, and what that does, it squirts a bit of fuel in the carburetor, so it's ready to go. You've got a choke knob. It's got a half setting and a full on setting. We always go with a full on setting on a cold machine. And then you've got the pull cord, so you need to hold the machine down firmly and hold that firmly as well, because you don't want that snapping out your hands if you haven't got it hard enough, because that's going to hurt. So you give it a good tug, and within 3 pulls that should turn over. Now this particular machine has got no fuel in it because I didn't want the engine to start. Now once that turns over, you'll hear the engine fire. It'll either start up and then you can get going. If it fires up but doesn't start properly, that's fine. What you need to do is turn the choke off, probably on half choke. Try it on half choke, or choke off altogether. Either one of them should usually start if the machine's in good nick. Now, once the machine starts up, and if choke is on full, once you press this throttle control, so that one goes down, and that throttle control is the one on the bottom. Okay, as you pull that trigger up, if the choke is on, it will automatically turn off. Now, if you're struggling to pull that cord while the machine's down on the ground, what you can do is use the weight of the machine to help give you a little bit more leverage as you're pulling it. So hold it firmly in both hands, and then just sort of drop the machine and pull the cord at the same time. Go, and again it should fire up. As soon as it starts going, that handle goes down, that one goes up, and the choke knob will be turned into the off position, and then you're away, you're ready to work. So to automatically extend the cord, you need to have the engine running on about half revs, so it's spinning quite fast. Then you need to gently tap the head on the ground. The centrifugal force will allow that cord to pull out, and then the blade that's within the guard will cut it to the optimum length. You haven't got to smack it down hard, it's just a simple half throttle, tap, tap. Every time you tap it, it will release it about another inch. Okay, so we've got our PPE on, the engine's running, we know the machine's good to go. So the next thing to do is just think about how we're actually operating the machine. And one of the key things to remember with a strimmer is it's going to be throwing all your clippings and debris from your right over to your left hand side. So when you're strimming, you've got to think about how you're actually moving around with the machine and making sure the clippings are getting chucked back onto the lawn rather than over pathways and up against trees, because that's just going to mean a lot more clearing up at the end of the job. So if we were trimming the perimeter of a lawn, you want to be going anti-clockwise, because that is going to be chucking the clippings back onto the lawn, which can then be cleared up by a mower rather than heaping them up at the edge of a building or over a path. Now, when you're going around obstacles like this that are in the middle of a lawn, you want to be going around clockwise, because again it's going to be chucking them onto the lawn and not the other way, which would be onto the obstacles, drain covers in this instance, where again you'd have to come back with a blower and clear them all off. So the other thing that's important is, where at all possible, you don't want to be walking backwards, because you're risking that kind of, you know, tripping over with the engine going. Finally, stones in the lawn, keep your eye out for stones, because that remove them if at all possible. And secondly, keep any glass windows behind you, because again you're going to form a bit of protection between the strimming action and any flying stones and smashing glass windows. So now you know how to move around with the machine. The last part of it is actually controlling the throttle properly. Now, most times you're using this machine, you're not going to need full throttle. It'll burn up your fuel quicker, and it also risks pinging stones at super high speed, you know, all over the place. So just have the throttle squeezed as much as is necessary to cut the material that you're actually cutting. The other thing is, don't pump the throttle to try and maintain the desired speed, because that's going to cause a lot more kind of wear and tear on that machine, and just mean, you know, replacing clutches and cables and that sort of thing before we really need to. So you're looking for a nice, smooth, even speed, whether that's, you know, just ticking over, or if it's you know, half throttle because you're just doing a lot of light grass. And the final thing really is, when you're cutting lawn edges, you can turn that over and cut an edge like that. That is a kind of an advanced technique to be using. There are potential problems with that, and there are better machines for doing that as well, like a dedicated edging tool. That's something we can look at in a separate video. So to summarise, we've had a look at the machine, we've checked it over generally, and we're happy that it's safe, good to go. We've looked at the safety stickers and the warning signs and the PPE requirements. We've also looked at how to move around with the machine safely, and we've also looked at throttle control. So taking all those bits into consideration, you should be good to go to use the machine safely. And the next thing is really looking at specific techniques and just practicing how to get a nice finish on different kinds of areas, and we'll cover those things off in another video.